We have with us today Mr. Gerd Leonhard, a well-known futurist and author of 5 books, a highly influential keynote speaker, think tank leader and advisor, and since late 2011, the founder of greenfuturist.com. Gerd truly practices what he preaches on virtuality, and you will see that come alive in this session. True to his session, he is virtually present with us, and not only is he going to talk to us, but he's also going to take questions from all of you, hence requesting everyone to kindly make a note of the questions on your notepad. We'll have our promoters around. If you have a question, you can simply raise your hand. Our promoters will collect the questions, and post the session, I will address those questions to Gerd on your behalf. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Gerd Leonhard. Let's have a huge round of applause for our speaker. Thank you.
Greetings and namaste. This is Gerd Leonhard, futurist in Zurich, Switzerland. I'm really delighted to provide a keynote for you guys today for MMA Impact India 2022. MMA is worldwide known for providing great guidance, events, and resources on the future of marketing and mobility. It's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to speak to you about virtuality. And virtuality is a lot more than VR. And the Metaverse, and it's not owned by Facebook. Right? Virtuality is a concept of not just being here in real life, like you can kind of see me here in the semi-Meatspace, so to speak, right? But it's the ability to be something else completely in virtuality, which is to change the way that I appear, what I look like, and to create a fantasy reality, very popular, of course, in gaming. And if you know gamers, or if you are a gamer yourself, you know how far that has already improved and moved forward. But basically, virtuality is a concept of existing only in the mind, or existing in the mind being what we see around us. A product of imagination, the opposite of reality, that's an interesting one, a manufactured, self-designed, simulated experience. I think that is the key word. How is that going to be achieved in a world where so many things around us need to be ready for this simulated reality, whether it's output and bandwidth and of course equipment, and especially in a country like India. I think that's quite a bit away in terms of actually making that happen. I think augmented reality is much more plausible as we're looking at this dual-fold future right in front of us, especially for marketing and especially in India. I think augmented reality is just the concept of having a wider field of vision, seeing things on my eyeglasses, holograms, projections, and all that stuff is technically speaking much more feasible, and it's based, of course, on the mobile device, which is the primary proving ground for these technologies in India, but also worldwide. So I would really bank on virtuality becoming sort of the second wave of this virtuality movement. And by 2030, we're going to see about 8 billion people connected to the internet, high speed, always on, and increasingly low cost. Of course, that is also a challenge in India, but immersed in augmented virtual mixed realities. So that's obviously not 5G, but we're talking about 10G or so, roughly, by 2030. Very big challenge. How do we provide equal access? And what does it mean to avail yourself of this? Is it going to change your economic standing and the possibilities of where that's going? Is it going to be good or bad for us? And like any technology, from the mobile phone all the way back to the internet and the television, it could be heaven, it could be hell. And we have to make sure that it's mostly heaven, 98%, and it's equally available to everybody. And that really gets me wondering about AR and VR, and of course about marketing as well. We have to find a way into that future that is mostly heaven. So also protecting humanity, which means, the right to disconnect, the right to exist only in real life. And of course, we have to think about what our kids are doing here and which way that's heading and how they're going to learn the real world when they live in the virtual world. And, for a long time, I've spoken about that data is the new oil, but that's an old hat, of course. Now, data is the new plutonium also. It can be used as a weapon. Look at social media. Right? Data is also like the new air, like nothing works without data. Artificial intelligence is the new electricity, the juice that flows in our networks, and the cloud is now the new office, right, since COVID. And that's going to continue in a hybrid world. Huge factor for India, right? You can work worldwide now very soon by having virtuality, hologram, augmented reality devices like Zoom times 1,000, right? It's also the new living room, the town square, as Elon Musk calls it, the airport. I can travel virtually in the cloud. right? And finally, of course, you could say that virtuality in general is kind of the new senses. It's like the expanded eyes or the new being. Blade Runner scene, right? More human than human. I think that's a pipe dream. We do want to remain human, and the question is this going to be a tool or is it going to be our lives? I think technology should not be our life. We should not live in there. We should use it as a tool. Great for doctors, lawyers, dentists, surgeons, and maybe police, right? Yes, but the question is, what do we do with this as people? And how does it fit into our view on values? Many different resources are showing huge growth in virtuality and augmented reality classes, and of course impact on society. Look at this curve, right? Everybody loves this kind of exponential curves, right? But how quickly will that happen in India? I think we're going to see a lot of work on augmentation and reality that can be looked at and morphed with mobile devices. That is going to be much more important. Of course, Facebook and Meta now has realized this and building web-based version of the Metaverse, which remains to be seen how great that would be. Essentially just a browser on steroids. But I think it could be really interesting, and lots of great work environments like the Horizon workspace I find very interesting, of course, for my work as a presenter. What is kind of strange, though, is ideas like this, having a virtuality set that simulates emotion so you can receive a kiss in cyberspace. I mean, the implications, of course, you can use your fantasy for this. But really here, the question is, do we really need this? Do we really need that to be simulated? Why wouldn't it be better? Isn't really a hug better than 1,000 Zoom calls? And are we going to have to wear a device like this to have fun in the future, or to work, right, or to study, right? Or is it going to be the good old TV on the nose? Not a good idea, right? I think anything that closes our face and encapsulates us into another reality probably won't work for quite some time, only for people who are hardcore gamers and who like that feeling to be there. I'm really betting on augmented reality. I think all the great glasses that we're seeing around, there's like 100 companies, Apple of course being one of them, Samsung, and so others, right? Creating an overlay of reality that could be really interesting, but also potentially addictive. And I'm not so sure that addiction is one more thing that we're going to need in this future. But hey, this is something that is coming. It's something that marketers have to think about. And the key thing about marketing is, of course, we don't want to build another mousetrap like we have with the internet itself and online advertising and Instagram and what have you, right? We don't need that. We need empowerment. Right? We need real experiences and real relationships to brands and people who buy from brands. This is why my bet is on augmented and mixed reality, not so much on VR. I find VR very interesting as a user, and I'm going to dive deeper into this, and I have been buying equipment to get involved with this. I buy everything, of course, right? But augmented virtual reality is really, I'm looking at this and saying, okay, this is why, when we look at human senses, like this is a Goosebumps video here, right? This great article from the Fair Observer says, virtual reality is really kind of impossible, like perpetual motion. Because the sensory inputs that come into our bodies, whether it's eyes, the ears, and emotions, and temperature, and so on, millions of vibration sensors, this is really what we do, they create a single unified experience. They are not generated by glasses. They're as real as it gets because we're using all of our senses, right? And when we touch things like water and we do things with our hands or feet, we have a sensation that goes beyond this one sense, and it's embedded in many other things. A lived sensory experience, same article, sensory fusion. Well, we have sensory fusion when we wear these glasses. Well, it's a sensory simulation, right? And we may have a kind of a King Midas problem. Basically, we want everything that we touch to turn into a miracle, into gold. The King Midas story. This may be not a very good idea for us to looking at it this way. It's just a tool that we can do things with. It isn't going to change our human reality, I don't think, in such a way. And of course, the conclusion of the article is that unfortunately for VR, there's no mathematical way to make a consistent world from a partial, delayed, corrupted data input. Because in the end, our brains really need 3D invasive data, pervasive data, right, to make that happen, to create a real experience. Because in the end, we don't see only with the eyes, we see with everything. All of our senses, our feelings, our ears, when we don't think with the brain, Every therapist will tell you that it's a lot more complicated. And intelligence, human intelligence, is not just logical firepower. Right? It's a lot more than that. And so VR is kind of has this problem that we are seeing only a partial thing and it's going to be incongruent. Right? So if you're looking at the possibility of VR sickness, for example, it's quite like general motion discomfort and very hard to get rid of. And I've experienced it several times. And I really think the user's perception of self-motion is going to be based on some sort of incongruent sensory input from the VR and not creating a very good experience. That's a major problem that has to do with our brain, not just with the devices that we use. So between those two things, AR and VR, let's compare the two and come to a conclusion on this. Point number one, AR is about open senses, an open world, right? An augmented world, not artificially a fantasy world, which is interesting, I think, for gaming, maybe for learning, maybe for instruction, maybe for digital twins in factories. Right? But for us as consumers, I wouldn't bet on that becoming a major hit, in any time soon. Because, wearing an outfit, no matter how amazing it is, requires a certain understanding of where you want to go. And AR offers sensory augmentation. That may already be too much for us, right? But overbearing 3D simulations in real time, seriously addictive as well. And AR augmented reality has a ready-to-go technology base in mobile phones, especially in India. And those devices will sooner or later all support augmented reality development kits and APIs and so on, where we can make this happen. So that's a real tangible opportunity there for marketers as well. And it provides a much more sustainable opportunity for humans. I mean, it may already be overwhelming, and I'm not sure I would want to have these on all the time with all this information floating down. And sometimes offline is the new luxury, right? Maybe something to remember for Indian marketing. A much more humanly sustainable experience. So the question is really, what do you prefer, right? Do you like the metaverse better, or do you like Meatspace? This is a great picture for me. Just a few years ago in Barcelona, near Barcelona and Dali's house. So the question is really, what do you prefer, right? I think Meatspace is here to stay. And we're not going to detach ourselves from who we are as people just because we can use virtual reality, right? So this is a really important question that marketers need to keep in mind. When we have our good friend Zuck, well, I don't know, I'm not sure he's a friend anymore, but it says it's about time when immersive digital worlds, as missing here, become the primary way we live our lives. I think that's just utterly ridiculous. The primary way we live our lives is as humans with other humans in our bodies. Right? Otherwise, we're going to enter minority space, red pill, blue pill environment. And I think it's great if Zuck can do some fencing using his virtual reality. And that's it's great for games. I give you that. It may be even great for work, to learn how to fence, for example. But the concept here of living in a world where everything becomes this miracle fantasy world, I think that is disturbing, to say the least, and not a great way for marketers to think of the world, because it isn't real, right? You can sell fake digital products or NFTs here, yes, but is it going to be bigger than real life? I very much doubt it. They hang together in different ways. So I say it's about living our actual lives in actuality to the fullest extent possible and supporting the effort with amazing technology. And that's really what I'm looking for in my life. I don't want technology to take over. And I think it's a very bad idea that we do this just because we can sell more stuff and people can buy more virtual assets, while their real life is falling apart. Definitely major challenge for India with 1.3 billion people, to help people understand what's going on here and to give them benefits. As we move into the metaverse, it's basically the discussion of those 5 things around it, very important. Of course, ultimately the real factor is real-time 3D, but also customizable avatars, built-in shopping, crypto commerce, NFTs, real-time environments, and spatial audio, which I like a lot as a musician, the concept of hearing people in different places. That's powerful. Is it going to be mass medium anytime soon? I don't think so. I think that's going to be a tool for people who are into it and who have enough resources and a T1 internet connection, 100G. Will the metaverse really bring a new creator economy? No, I think that's a fake promise. There's no such thing. Creators economy is made by creators and by the circumstances of culture and society and policies, not by technology. And it will not be interoperable. I mean, think about Infosys and Dell and Baidu and everybody else coming together to create an open version of the metaverse, I think that's doubtful. That's not how it has worked until now, and probably not how it's going to work. I think the metaverse, if we do it wrong, it could end up in the meta-perverse, which means turning everything that is dear to us upside down, gives everything that we've ever asked for and none of what we really need. That would not be good development, not for marketers, not for society, not for India. Check out themetaperverse.com. I think it's just metaperverse.com, where you can find more stories about why I call this a metaperverse. Wired says the metaverse is simply big tech, just bigger. I think that's so true as we're moving into this future where a lot of people are really excited about this, including, of course, the big tech companies around the world, the e-commerce companies. And here's a great fake article from The Onion, great comedy here, about Jeff Bezos when he says, soon the metaverse will be indistinguishable from the actual world because I will also own most of it. That's so true. That's something we should really think about, where that's going to go and where that's heading and if that's going to work for us. So, digital ethics and virtuality, this is a key topic because every technology is now changing the way that we think about ourselves, it's changing society, it's changing what we believe in. And I think one of the key challenges is that it could create exponentially more digital divides, which are already a major topic in every country, especially in India. So they have, that have enough, the top 5 to 10%, they can dive in and do all these fancy things, nobody else can touch it because it creates inequality in this sort of K-shaped way, right? The top goes higher and the bottom falls out for the lower people, like we have already had in the COVID crisis, and that is just not a good idea. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about marketing. It has to be accessible for everybody. Our primary objective should be to connect everybody at basically zero cost, but not connect them necessarily to the fanciest VR equipment we can imagine. The other one is disengagement. As this driver here is falling asleep in the Tesla, right? The question is, are we going to fall asleep in virtual reality because we're disengaged, right? We're like turned off to reality, a kind of fancy escapism. And that's always been a big story with television, with the internet, with gaming, right? But pervasive escapism in society, that is not going to be a good thing. And it's not going to get any better just because we buy more stuff there, right? I mean, this is a question ultimately also who controls it. Who's mission control for the metaverse? And who's mission control for all that data? Think about all the clickbaiting and all of the data mining that goes on. It's like social media times 1,000. So that needs to change. We need to look at how we can make that into a nice ecosystem. And will this kind of virtuality really make us more human? I think sometimes it may. It's an amazing tool, and that can lead us there. But will we be happier, or will we just buy more stuff we don't need, that nobody ever wanted, that we don't care about? So this is a very, very big question, because as we're moving into this future, that is basically the question. Number one is, why are we doing this? And this is a question you must ask and answer as a marketer and as a brand. And that's a question of purpose. We're moving into the purpose economy, away from the idea of the ownership economy necessarily. And this is an interesting topic, as we think about AR and VR and what it can do for marketers. If we think of humans like this, there's a brain in the box and it connects to the internet, and this is kind of the fantasy of the singularity. We can upload our brain to the internet. No, we can't, and no, we won't be human. No, I mean, we probably can, but we shouldn't. And the other concept of this sort of happiness kit, which is quite common now in technology, is that just have the right tech and you're happy. Well, of course, that isn't true. This is a fantasy story, and really happiness is something that we discover with ourselves. And marketers make their clients, their customers happy, and brands make them happy by discovering that through other products, but essentially leading them on to a different way of looking at this. Right? And great scene here from Blade Runner, the virtuality scene, Blade Runner 2046, where we have a huge hologram speaking to the main actor there, and ultimately, of course, the next thing is the hologram appearing in different ways and then being shaped by what the character wants the hologram to look like. But in the end, of course, the power collapses and the hologram is gone, and he's really lonely. So in the end, algorithms know the logic of everything, but the feeling of nothing. Right? Essentially, this isn't real. It's a simulation of real. It's an approximation of real, and it has value for that. But it isn't the same. And I think to me, marketing means connecting to reality, right? People to what they really want, what they really appreciate. And the concept of having a sort of machine that simulates half my brain is just utterly ridiculous, because we're not anywhere close to this. And is it possible? Is it desirable? Or neither? Right? We want to augment our power as humans. Right? We want to create realities that we enjoy for many different reasons. We don't want to create isolationism and detachment and loneliness. You know, some of the power users of social networks are the most lonely people you can imagine, and they have the highest suicide rate in the world. That has been proven for Instagram and Facebook and others. One of the side effects of too much of a good thing, right? So as we go here, we're going to end up in a place where perpetually the connectivity to the top, so to speak, right, could capture us too much, and we could end up with this perception of the useless real life, like a useless human in the end, you know, because we only exist and not in real life. That would not be good, because it also kills our democracy. It's no surprise in the last 10 years, democracy has faltered in many different places because people are disengaged and escaping into already mobile devices. And this really needs to be tackled, because here we have the challenge to get it right, and this is a huge topic for India, again with 1.3 billion people. How to engage, right? We need to engage, not escape. And engagement can be done, of course, in augmented reality and in virtuality, but we have to keep that in mind as the utmost paradigm and the goal. You know, we don't want to build another filter bubble that turns out to be 500x of social media. We don't want a filter bubble, or we don't want a bubble life. And I think to look in that direction is just creating another mousetrap for marketing, and it won't work. You know, there's a lot of hype about this, but really what works is real things with real connections, and to get away from this kind of dehumanization aspect that everything has to be mediated to be worthy. Right? This is reductionism, and also creates addiction. Right? So I think the wise brands, the good marketers also protect us from too much of this. I mean, this is what Apple is doing, for example, by speaking about how important privacy is and how important civil rights are. Yes, it's very expensive as a consequence, Apple not using our data, right? But to protect humanity, I think that's the ultimate goal, of course, of every good brand. And it should be something when we think about AR, where we are going with this. Because the reality is humans aren't about data. We're not a control desk like this, right? We are really much more than that. We are about engagements, experiences, relationships, and this is why we buy things. You know? So don't shoot in the wrong direction here. I think anything that supports this idea is about content marketing, about narrative, about creating great environments, experiences. That's where it's going. So let me summarize and say what's happening, where are we going with this? Clearly, humans and machines are kind of converging, parenthesis, right? And the Meatspace and cyberspace is coming together. And that's inevitable. That's happening everywhere. But we have to safeguard ourselves to a certain extent by saying, okay, we need to figure out what is the balance between those two things. And what is good for us and what is not. It's not just good because it exists and it's possible. It's also good because we have certain values. And this is going to be about the proaction. You know, how we move forward into new ideas and precaution. And I really think we have to think about that also when we think about how we market to people. Being proactive and jumping into new things and trying them, that's good. But also precaution. We don't want the same thing to happen that happened with social media, where it's becoming a distortion engine, you know, based on AI, algorithmic news data. That's completely broken, this ecosystem, right? So we have to think about both of those things as we roll out new things. We have to think about the enormous power, you know, becoming as God, parenthesis, of course, the Sistine Chapel theme here, re-rigged with the interactivity. And we're becoming very powerful, and that's great, and I would definitely investigate and see how good that will do for us. But just because it's feasible, that doesn't mean it makes sense. What makes sense, I think in India, mobile devices, augmented reality, glasses, holograms, expanded reality for some users, web-based experiences, that makes sense. Right? To a certain degree, of course, we have to still watch the overload factor here. And then we have to think about commerce versus purpose. You know, it's great to sell stuff, but you know, Facebook makes $160 million profit per day. But do they have a good purpose? And I would say they don't. Not anymore. They've lost their purpose, which I think partly why their stock is collapsing like this. So don't lose your purpose just because there's commerce. Yeah? In the end, hype or happiness. Right? That's our choice. What kind of future do you want? What kind of future do you want for your children, your grandchildren? I mean, that is the key question when we think about marketing, when we think about augmented reality. Do we want people to live in virtual reality just because they can become better sales targets? I think that's a very bad idea. We want to create value, tell real stories, talk about where it's going. So these two things in the end, bottom line also taken from my book, Technology versus Humanity, embrace technology, but don't become it. I think if you embrace technology and you understand humans, then you can come up with great products and great campaigns and great marketing ideas. But don't just follow a hype, right? Because it creates a technological mirage, a fantasy land that we can tap into only to observe our dollars floating away. So embrace technology, but don't become it. And it's been a real pleasure to speak for you, to you. And now we're going to take questions. And I want the tough questions. I want to know what you're thinking. I want you to ambush me with your tough comments, and I really look forward to diving in. So let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a huge round of applause for that wonderful session. And thank you to each one of you for sending across some questions. So, hi Gerd, firstly, thank you so very much for joining in virtually. It really means a lot. It is an honor to have you with us today. So, our very first question is by Mr. Puneet Avasthi from KANTAR, our partner for this session. So, his question is, will virtuality be an enabler of newer gaming experiences, or will it in times come to be an enabler of commerce? How far away are we from such a scenario?
Well, you know, I see great possibilities in virtuality. I mean, it's not, the gaming part is obvious, right? There's going to be a lot more of that. And also gaming, learning and gaming, that's also very close. The other great use I see for virtuality is, of course, communication, working together in virtual platforms, which I think is going to be fantastic. It's kind of like Zoom X1000, you know, and that's going to be amazing. Shopping, yeah, I think to a large degree it will remain experimental for some time. So I see the time frame mostly next year coming up with augmented reality, and then further applications like this that would be used by most people that have mobiles, and then maybe the mobile becomes sort of an AR environment. And real actual virtual reality, I think it's going to be businesses, it's going to be government organizations, maybe top scale collaboration will eventually happen too. That's probably more than 5 years away. And then we'll have lots of issues about, you know, the inequality issue and the digital divide and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I think it's going to be very exciting.
Thank you so much, Gerd. Moving on to our next question from Tailwind Consulting. In the context of brands and businesses, how are the concepts of humanity and technology tugging at each other?
Well, I mean, it's clearly a priority that we have to make. You know, I always say if an invention does not serve the human good, then we should not sell it or use it or buy it. And this is becoming a very important issue because basically we have too many things that are being sold and bought and used that are kind of clawing at our ability to keep our data to ourselves or understanding who we are. Like, you know, Instagram is one of those things where I'm kind of wondering, like, already creating an alternative world and has negative impact and of course positive impact for selling. So sometimes there's really a discrepancy between how well can we reach people and sell things and do things, and how much good does it do in general? And there's got to be a balance of sort, right? So social media isn't lost, but it needs to be rebooted. You know, social media has become a social media to a large degree, right? What we want is empowerment. I mean, this is how every brand is going to sell, right? By empowering users, by creating excitement, stories. And what we have now is so much technology is kind of a disempowerment and a disengagement. And I think it's the wrong direction. And that's something we should really pay attention to. You know, disengaging people isn't going to make more money. It may look like it does, but it doesn't.
Thank you so much, Gerd. And our next question is from Megha from Medtronic. How much percentage of marketing mix should constitute a VR considering the new age marketing approach?
Well, you know, I'd be careful with making a standard rule like this, because obviously it's a cultural question and a question of technology adoption. You know, here in Switzerland, we have all fancy devices and 5G even on top of the mountain. Yeah, but people are not very fond of virtual experiences. Maybe in India, it's kind of the other way around. You know, people may be very fond of it, but the equipment is lacking in so many places, and of course, the throughput and the bandwidth. Yeah. So I would be very careful making a standard rule. I would probably put a quarter of my money towards the virtuality concept and figuring out what to do. I wouldn't put that much into extreme top end of that, but more into the obvious things, like, you know, using augmented reality with a web browser and having that become sort of a pop-out reality. You know, that could be really interesting, especially for shopping. And I think we should look for the low-hanging fruits. There was a futurist, there is a futurist called Paul Sappho, who once said we should. Can you hear me? Yeah, we should not confuse a short distance with a short way, right? That's going to be very important to keep in mind.
Thank you so much, Gerd. And Gerd, we have a journalist who's joined us here this evening, and he wants to ask you a question, requesting you to kindly ask the same.
This is Pavan from Social Samosa. So we are a media publishing house.
Can you please repeat it? Yeah.
Sure. This is Pavan from Social Samosa. So I'm from a media publishing house that covers social media marketing and the new up-and-coming age of services like Web 3.0 services and all. So my question to you is, India has always been a very price-oriented country. A lot of the population did not come on the internet until data became cheaper. So one of the points that you mentioned is accessibility is an important part of Metaverse. It should be accessible by everyone. And as of now, for example, Meta has launched Horizon Worlds, which requires VR Quest headsets, and Metaverse is not fully, or maybe it's functional, but it's not at an optimal level that it could really provide the experience on a smartphone or a laptop or a mobile. So do you think Metaverse can function at an optimal level on a device like smartphone, which is like the most accessed device right now? And I have another question if you have time. Could you also please share some use case applications for brands and marketing in Metaverse?
Yes, very good question, and I must say thanks for asking. So first, I really believe that if we don't just look at the Metaverse as one thing, like either all or nothing, then we'd be much better off. So a little glimpse of augmented reality, a little bit of mixed reality, a little bit of virtuality for those that can afford it would probably be a good idea, rather than saying, you know, it's all out or nothing. I don't see a great market in India and other countries like India where people have to buy all that high-end stuff. I mean, even I here in my T1 internet connection, you know, having to spend thousands of euros to experiment, it's kind of like a very exclusive position, right? I don't think that's going to be a reality for a lot of people in India anytime soon, even though connectivity is improving very, very quickly. Lots of things are improving in India with Digital India and all that. That's good, but you know, I don't see that top end coming anytime soon. So I think it'd be much wiser to look at a limited experience that are entirely possible, capable, and financially doable for people that integrate part of this, right? So maybe we shouldn't be talking about the Metaverse also because of the Meta application, like the company Meta, Facebook. We should maybe think of that as a different name. Like I like the name Virtuality. Being in Virtuality, I think that the use cases are obvious. We're going to collaborate much better in virtual spaces, and that is really tantalizing, I think, for a lot of people. Shopping will be great. We have online shopping malls and we have social commerce, right? Big deal in India, also in China and so on. So maybe in the future it'll be social/augmented commerce, you know? That's kind of the next transition. I see a lot of that happening. And would I sell virtual products? I don't think that's going to be a great thing, period, but not anytime soon. It's more like something where you stake out your ground to be there, you know? But I see it much more hands-on in the sense of just making people's experience better on the mobile or using expanded mobile applications.
Thank you so much, Gerd. And our audience has many more questions for you, but unfortunately, we're running behind our schedule. And hence, with your permission, we would love to send you our questions. We would love to email you the questions and requesting you to kindly address the same.
Okay, yes, sure, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Gerd. Thank you so very much for joining us once again. It was an honor to have you here. Thank you for taking your time out for us. Let's have a huge round of applause for Gerd.
Thank you.